The orange cat discovered a hungry kitten in the yard, and what he did next surprised everyone. Sunset Acres Nursing Home nestled comfortably on the outskirts of Maplewood, a town that epitomized the quiet charm of the American Midwest. It was a place where life moved at a slower pace, where neighbors knew each other, and where the changing seasons painted the landscape in a predictable, comforting cycle. The nursing home itself was a sprawling, single-story building, its brick facade softened by well-tended flower beds and neatly trimmed hedges. Large windows offered views of the surrounding grounds, a peaceful expanse of lawn dotted with mature oak and maple trees. The atmosphere at Sunset Acres was one of gentle activity and quiet companionship. Residents could be seen strolling along the paved pathways, chatting on the porch swings, or tending to the small vegetable garden behind the main building. The air was often filled with the sounds of laughter, conversation, and the gentle strains of music drifting from the common room. It was a place of care, of comfort, and of the quiet dignity of aging. And among the residents, both human and honorary, was Little Grandpa. Little Grandpa was an orange cat, not a particularly young cat, nor a particularly large one. He was, in fact, rather ordinary-looking, with fur the color of faded marmalade, a slightly ragged ear, and a gait that had slowed with the passage of years. He wasn't a pet, not in the traditional sense. He belonged to no one, and yet he belonged to everyone at Sunset Acres. He was simply there, a constant presence, a fixture of the nursing home landscape. No one knew exactly when he had first appeared. Some said he'd wandered in years ago, a skinny stray seeking shelter and food. Others whispered that he had belonged to a former resident, a woman named Mrs. Davison, who had passed away peacefully in her sleep. Whatever his origins, Little Grandpa had become an integral part of the Sunset Acres community. He earned his nickname from the residents, a term of endearment that reflected both his age and his demeanor. He was a quiet cat, reserved, not given to boisterous displays of affection like some of the younger strays that occasionally wandered onto the grounds. He was aloof with other cats, keeping to himself, preferring the company of the elderly residents. His days followed a predictable routine. He'd start his rounds in the early morning, just as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. He'd patrol the perimeter of the building, sniffing at the bushes, marking his territory, and occasionally chasing a wayward mouse or vole. Then, he'd make his way to the back patio, where he'd sit patiently, waiting for the kitchen staff to arrive. They'd often leave him a small saucer of milk or a few scraps of meat, a silent acknowledgement of his long-standing presence. Throughout the day, he'd wander through the grounds, his movements slow and deliberate. He'd visit his favorite spots, a sunny patch of lawn beneath a maple tree, a comfortable spot on a wicker chair on the porch, a quiet corner near the rose bushes. He'd observe the residents, his amber eyes watchful and knowing. He seemed to have a particular affinity for the elderly, a deep, unspoken empathy for their frailties and their loneliness. He'd often sit beside them on the benches, allowing them to stroke his fur, his purr a low, rumbling vibration. Sometimes he'd bring them gifts, a fallen leaf, a smooth, gray stone, a feather dropped by a passing bird. These offerings were presented without fanfare, simply placed at their feet, a silent gesture of companionship. He was a comfort, a quiet presence, a furry friend in a place where loneliness could often creep in like the evening shadows. He was Little Grandpa, the silent guardian of Sunset Acres, a testament to the enduring power of connection, even in the twilight years. And as the autumn leaves began to turn and a crispness settled in the air, Little Grandpa continued his rounds, unaware that a small, desperate life was about to intersect with his own, changing the rhythm of Sunset Acres forever. Behind a maintenance shed at Sunset Acres, tucked away from the manicured lawns and cheerful flower beds, lay a neglected corner. It was a place where fallen leaves accumulated undisturbed, forming a thick, damp carpet over the cracked concrete. Weeds sprouted between the paving stones, and a rusty, forgotten watering can lay on its side, a testament to the area's abandonment. A dense, overgrown forsythia bush, its branches bare and brittle in the late autumn chill, provided a semblance of shelter, casting long, skeletal shadows across the ground. It was in this withered corner, hidden from view, that the kitten huddled. She was small, even for a kitten, a fragile ball of matted, grayish-brown fur. Her body was painfully thin, her ribs visible beneath her dull coat. She was weak, barely able to lift her head, her movements sluggish and uncoordinated. Her eyes, normally bright and curious in a healthy kitten, were half-closed, clouded with a milky film, a sign of dehydration and malnutrition. She was cold, shivering uncontrollably despite the meager protection offered by the fallen leaves. She had been there for days, perhaps longer. No one knew for sure. She was silent, her cries too weak to carry beyond the confines of the neglected corner. She was a whisper of a life, fading fast, on the verge of slipping away unnoticed. Little Grandpa, on his usual morning rounds, discovered her by accident. He was patrolling the perimeter of the building, his senses alert, his nose twitching, when a faint, unfamiliar scent caught his attention. It was the scent of sickness, of vulnerability, of a life hanging precariously in the balance. He paused, his ears pricking forward, his amber eyes narrowing. He sniffed the air again, pinpointing the source of the scent. It was coming from behind the shed, from the withered corner he usually avoided. He hesitated. He was a creature of habit, of routine. He preferred the familiar paths, the sunny spots, the predictable interactions with the residents. He didn't seek out trouble, didn't invite complications. And this sentence spoke of trouble, of need, of something he couldn't quite define. But something compelled him forward. A deep, instinctive urge, a flicker of compassion that stirred within his aging heart. He cautiously rounded the corner of the shed, his movements slow and deliberate, his gaze fixed on the pile of leaves beneath the forsythia bush. He saw her then, the tiny, shivering form, almost invisible against the backdrop of brown and gray. He approached slowly, his steps silent on the damp leaves. He sniffed her gently, his whiskers brushing against her matted fur. He registered her weakness, her coldness, the faint, almost imperceptible rise and fall of her chest. He had seen death before. He had seen it in the eyes of the elderly residents he had comforted, in the still forms of the birds and mice he had hunted. He knew the scent of it, the feel of it, and he knew that this kitten was close. But instead of turning away, instead of retreating to the comfort of his familiar routine, little Grandpa did something unexpected. He nudged the kitten gently with his nose, a soft, encouraging gesture. He licked her face, his rough tongue surprisingly gentle, trying to rouse her, to stimulate her circulation. He then circled around her, assessing the situation. He knew he couldn't leave her there. She wouldn't survive the night. The temperature was dropping, and a cold wind was beginning to pick up, rustling the dry leaves and carrying the threat of rain. He made a decision. He went to his usual spot near the kitchen door, where the staff often left him scraps of food. He found a small piece of cooked chicken, a leftover from someone's lunch. He carefully picked it up in his jaws, ignoring the tempting aroma, and carried it back to the withered corner. He placed the chicken near the kitten's nose, hoping the scent would entice her to eat. But she was too weak, too listless. She didn't even react. Little Grandpa nudged her again, a little more insistently this time. He licked her face, her ears, her tiny, frail body. He purred, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through his chest, a sound he usually reserved for the elderly residents he comforted. He curled up beside her, his warm body pressing against her cold, shivering form. He wrapped his tail around her, creating a small, furry cocoon, a shield against the encroaching cold. He would stay with her. He would keep her warm. He would wait. He wouldn't let her face the night alone. The wind picked up, and the first drops of rain began to fall. But little Grandpa remained, a steadfast guardian in the withered corner, his presence a testament to the unexpected compassion that could bloom even in the most unlikely of hearts. The rain intensified, transforming from a light drizzle to a steady downpour. The wind howled, rattling the windows of Sunset Acres and whipping the bare branches of the trees into a frenzy. Inside, the residents were settling in for the evening, enjoying the warmth and comfort of their rooms, the soft glow of lamps chasing away the gathering darkness. But outside, in a withered corner behind the shed, little Grandpa remained steadfast, his body a shield against the elements. The kitten, nestled against his warmth, was still shivering, but her breathing was slightly more regular, a faint, fragile rhythm against the backdrop of the storm. Little Grandpa knew it wasn't enough. The kitten needed more than warmth. She needed nourishment, she needed medical attention, she needed a chance to survive. He had done all he could, but it was clear that his efforts alone wouldn't be sufficient. He was a creature of habit, of routine. He rarely interacted with the staff, preferring the company of the residents, the quiet companionship of those who understood the unspoken language of silence and touch. He had never sought out human intervention, never asked for help. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, the life of this tiny, fragile creature depended on him. And he knew he had to do something, anything, to save her. He started with small attempts. He left the kitten briefly, venturing out into the rain, trying to get the attention of the kitchen staff. He rubbed against their legs, meowing softly, but they were busy preparing dinner, their minds occupied with their tasks. They didn't notice him, or if they did, they dismissed him as just another stray looking for a handout. He tried the main entrance, sitting on the steps, staring pointedly at the door, hoping someone would see him, would understand his silent plea. But the lobby was empty, the residents already gathered in the dining room for their evening meal. He even tried to follow a nurse inside, darting between her feet as she entered the building, but she shooed him away, scolding him gently. "Not now, little Grandpa. You know you're not allowed inside." Frustration began to mount. He was running out of time. The kitten was growing weaker, her body colder, her breathing more shallow. He had to make them understand. He had to make them see. He returned to the withered corner, licking the kitten's face, nuzzling her gently, as if to reassure her, to tell her he hadn't given up. He curled up beside her again, providing what little warmth he could, his mind racing, searching for a solution. Then it came to him, a desperate idea, a last resort. He left the kitten again, this time heading towards the wing of the building where the nurse's office was located. He knew this area well. He often sat on the windowsill outside, watching the residents as they received their medication or had their checkups. He found the window of the nurse's office. It was dark inside, but he could see a faint glow from a computer screen, a sign that someone might still be there. He stood on his hind legs, stretching his body as tall as he could, and reached up, his claws scrabbling against the glass. He scratched, lightly at first, then with increasing urgency. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound was barely audible above the wind and rain, but he persisted. Then, he did something he had never done before. He cried out. It wasn't a meow, not the usual sound he made. It was a strange, guttural cry, a sound filled with desperation, with urgency, with a primal plea for help. It was a sound that echoed through the quiet corridors of the nursing home, a sound that cut through the noise of the storm, a sound that demanded attention. Inside the office, Nurse Sarah, a young woman with a kind face and a compassionate heart, was finishing up some paperwork. She had been at Sunset Acres for 5 years, and she had grown fond of little Grandpa, often leaving out extra food for him and admiring his quiet dignity. She heard the scratching first, dismissing it as the wind or a branch scraping against the window. But then, she heard the cry. It was a sound unlike anything she had ever heard before. It was mournful, desperate, and filled with an urgency that sent a shiver down her spine. She stopped what she was doing, her head tilting, listening intently. The cry came again, louder this time, more insistent. It was definitely little Grandpa. But why? What was wrong? She rose from her desk and went to the window, peering out into the darkness. She saw him then, a small, orange shape huddled against the glass, his eyes wide and pleading. He scratched again, then let out another one of those strange, heart-wrenching cries. Sarah's heart clenched. She knew, instinctively, that something was terribly wrong. She grabbed her coat and rushed out of the office, following the sound of little Grandpa's cries. He led her through the rain, his small body a blur of orange against the darkness. He kept looking back, as if to make sure she was following, his urgency palpable. He led her to the withered corner, to the pile of leaves beneath the forsythia bush. And there, she saw her, the tiny, shivering kitten barely clinging to life. "Oh, you poor thing," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with compassion. She gently scooped up the kitten, her hands cupping its fragile body. It was cold, so cold. "Little Grandpa," she said, looking at the orange cat, her eyes filled with admiration and gratitude. "You saved her. You brought me to her." She rushed the kitten inside, little Grandpa following close at her heels, his usual aloofness replaced by a fierce, protective concern. He had done it. He had broken his silence, overcome his reticence, and sought help. He had saved a life. The kitten, cradled in Nurse Sarah's arms, was rushed to the small examination room at Sunset Acres. Sarah, trained in basic first aid, quickly assessed the situation. The kitten was severely dehydrated, malnourished, and hypothermic. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, her pulse weak and thready. She was, without a doubt, in critical condition. "We need to get her to Dr. Evans," Sarah said to a colleague, her voice urgent. "Call him. Tell him it's an emergency." While her colleague made the call, Sarah wrapped the kitten in a warm towel, placing a hot water bottle, carefully wrapped to prevent burns, beside her. She gently rubbed the kitten's tiny body, trying to stimulate circulation, whispering soft, reassuring words. Little Grandpa sat by the door, watching intently, his amber eyes fixed on the kitten. He didn't interfere, didn't make a sound. He simply observed, his presence a silent vigil, a testament to his unwavering concern. Dr. Evans, the local veterinarian, arrived within minutes, his face etched with concern. He was an older man, with a gentle demeanor and a deep love for animals. He had been serving the Maplewood community for decades, and he knew little Grandpa well, having treated him for minor ailments over the years. He examined the kitten carefully, his experienced hands feeling for broken bones, checking her heart and lungs, assessing her overall condition. "She's in bad shape," he said grimly, "but she's a fighter. We'll do everything we can." He administered fluids intravenously, gave her a dose of antibiotics, and placed her in a small, heated incubator. He explained to Sarah that the next few hours would be critical. The kitten, now under Dr. Evans's care, was taken to his clinic, a small, cozy building on the edge of town. Sarah promised to keep everyone at Sunset Acres updated. Back at the nursing home, the news of little Grandpa's heroic actions spread quickly. The staff, who had always tolerated the cat, now viewed him with a newfound respect and admiration. The residents, many of whom had their own stories of beloved pets, were deeply touched by the story. "He's a true hero, that cat," said Mrs. Gable, a resident known for her sharp wit and even sharper tongue. "He has more compassion in his little paw than some humans I know." "He's the postman of old souls," whispered Mr. Johnson, a quiet, gentle man who rarely spoke. "He brings comfort and companionship to those who need it most." The moniker stuck. Little Grandpa, already a beloved figure, became a legend. The staff started investigating the kitten's origins. Where had she come from? How had she ended up in that neglected corner of the yard? Nurse Sarah, driven by a sense of responsibility and a growing affection for both the kitten and little Grandpa, took the lead. She started asking questions, talking to the residents, the groundskeepers, and the local animal shelter. She learned that a house on the edge of the property, bordering the nursing home grounds, had been recently cleared out. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hawthorne, had passed away a few days earlier. Mrs. Hawthorne was a quiet woman, said Mr. Peterson, the head groundskeeper. Kept to herself, mostly, but she loved her cat. A little tabby it was. Always saw them together in the garden. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The kitten was likely Mrs. Hawthorne's cat, somehow separated from her during the house clearance, lost and frightened, seeking shelter in the only place she knew, the familiar grounds bordering her former home. Nurse Sarah visited the empty house, now silent and forlorn. She found a few scattered cat toys, a scratching post, a faded photograph of Mrs. Hawthorne holding a small, tabby kitten. It was her, without a doubt. The story, now complete, resonated deeply with everyone at Sunset Acres. It was a story of loss, of resilience, of the unexpected bonds that can form between creatures, both human and animal. It was a story of a lonely kitten, a compassionate cat, and a community that rallied together to offer comfort and care. Meanwhile, at Dr. Evans's clinic, the kitten was slowly, miraculously responding to treatment. She was still weak, still fragile, but her breathing was stronger, her eyes were clearer, and she had even managed to lap up a few drops of milk. Dr. Evans, cautiously optimistic, called Sarah with an update. "She's not out of the woods yet," he said, "but she's a fighter. I think she's going to make it." Sarah relayed the good news to the residents and staff, who greeted it with cheers and tears of relief. Little Grandpa, who had been unusually subdued since the kitten's departure, seemed to sense the positive turn of events. He perked up, his tail twitched, and he even allowed a few residents to stroke him, accepting their affection with a quiet dignity. A few days later, the kitten, still weak but steadily improving, was returned to Sunset Acres. A small, comfortable bed was prepared for her in a quiet corner of the common room, a space where she could be monitored and cared for by both the staff and the residents. And there, waiting patiently by the bed, was little Grandpa, his orange fur a beacon of hope and welcome in the quiet room. The return of the kitten to Sunset Acres was met with a quiet joy, a collective sigh of relief that resonated throughout the nursing home. The staff, already accustomed to accommodating little Grandpa's presence, readily adapted to having another feline resident, albeit a much smaller and more fragile one. A soft bed, nestled in a quiet corner of the common room, became the kitten's haven, a place of warmth, safety, and constant attention. Little Grandpa's reaction was, at first, cautious. He approached the bed slowly, his amber eyes studying the tiny, sleeping form within. He sniffed the air, his whiskers twitching, processing the familiar scent, now tinged with the lingering smell of antiseptic and medication. He circled the bed once, twice, his movements deliberate, his gaze unwavering. Then, as if satisfied with his assessment, he hopped onto the bed, carefully avoiding the kitten's still fragile body, and curled up beside her, his orange for a vibrant contrast to the soft, white blanket. He began to purr, a low, rumbling sound that filled the quiet corner, a lullaby of comfort and reassurance. The residents, witnessing this scene, were deeply moved. They saw in little Grandpa's actions not just instinct, but a profound sense of compassion, a willingness to share his space, his warmth, his very being with this vulnerable creature. They saw a reflection of their own needs, their own desires for connection and companionship. The kitten, slowly gaining strength, responded to little Grandpa's presence. She'd nuzzle against his warm fur, seeking comfort and security. She'd lick his ear, a tiny, tentative gesture of affection. She'd knead her paws on his side, a sign of contentment and trust. The residents, in turn, became actively involved in the kitten's care. They'd take turns sitting by her bed, talking to her softly, stroking her fur, offering her tiny morsels of food. They'd share stories of their own pets, their own experiences with loss and companionship. The kitten, in her own small way, had become a catalyst for connection, a focal point for their shared empathy and affection. It was Mrs. Gable, the resident known for her sharp wit, who first coined the phrase. "He's the postman of old souls," she declared, her voice surprisingly gentle. "He brings comfort to those who are nearing the end, and he guides the lost ones to a new beginning." The name stuck. Little Grandpa, already a beloved figure, became something more, a symbol of hope, of resilience, of the enduring power of connection. He was no longer just a cat. He was a legend, a guardian, a furry embodiment of the spirit of Sunset Acres. The story of Little Grandpa and the kitten spread beyond the walls of the nursing home, reaching the wider Maplewood community. Local newspapers ran articles, social media posts went viral, and people from all walks of life were touched by the heartwarming tale. Donations poured in food, blankets, toys, and offers to help with the kitten's medical expenses. But amidst all the attention, the core of the story remained unchanged. The quiet bond between an old orange cat and a tiny, rescued kitten. They were an unlikely pair, separated by age, by experience, by the vast chasm that separates the beginning of life from its twilight years. And yet, they were connected, bound together by a shared vulnerability, a shared need for comfort, and a shared capacity for love. As the weeks passed, the kitten grew stronger, her playful nature emerging. She'd pounce on Little Grandpa's tail, bat at his ears, and chase after imaginary foes. Little Grandpa, in turn, would tolerate her antics with a patient indulgence, occasionally swatting her gently with a paw or grooming her with his rough tongue. They'd often be found curled up together, asleep in a sunbeam, their bodies intertwined, their purrs blending together in a harmonious symphony. It was a scene of perfect contentment, a testament to the healing power of companionship, a living embodiment of the never-ending cycle of love that Little Grandpa, the postman of old souls, had come to represent. He had found a purpose, a connection, and a legacy that would endure long after he, too, crossed the final threshold. The kitten and the orange cat lived together, one old, one young, as if to pass on the love, showing everyone that the seemingly indifferent cat was anything but. Spring gave way to summer, and the kitten, no longer a frail and sickly creature, blossomed into a playful, energetic young cat. She retained her tabby markings, a subtle reminder of her mother, Mrs. Hawthorne's beloved pet. The staff and residents decided to name her Hope, a fitting tribute to her resilience and the spirit she brought to Sunset Acres. Hope would spend her days exploring the nursing home, chasing sunbeams, batting at dust motes, and charming everyone she encountered. She'd pounce on unsuspecting residents' feet, then dart away with a mischievous glint in her eyes. She'd curl up on laps, purr with contentment, and accept endless strokes and cuddles. Little Grandpa, while still maintaining his dignified composure, seemed to enjoy Hope's youthful energy. He'd watch her antics with a patient amusement, occasionally joining in her games, albeit at a slower, more deliberate pace. He'd groom her, teach her the best napping spots, and share his gifts, leaves, feathers, the occasional captured insect, with a surprising generosity. But time, as it always does, marched on. Little Grandpa, already an old cat when he found Hope, began to show his age more profoundly. His movements became slower, his gait more unsteady. He spent more time sleeping, curled up in his favorite sunbeams, his purr a little weaker, his breathing a little more labored. The residents and staff noticed the change, their hearts heavy with the unspoken understanding that Little Grandpa's time was drawing near. They showered him with even more affection, making sure he was always comfortable, always surrounded by love. Hope, too, seemed to sense the shift. She became more gentle with Little Grandpa, less boisterous in her play. She'd often curl up beside him, her small body pressed against his, offering him warmth and companionship. One peaceful autumn afternoon, almost a year after he had found Hope in the withered corner, Little Grandpa passed away quietly in his sleep, nestled in his favorite spot on the porch, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. His passing was mourned by everyone at Sunset Acres. He had been more than just a cat. He had been a friend, a companion, a symbol of resilience and compassion. He had touched their lives in profound ways, reminding them of the importance of connection, the beauty of simple gestures, and the enduring power of love. They buried him beneath the old oak tree, near the stone bench where he had spent so much of his time. They placed a small, smooth stone on his grave, engraved with his name, Little Grandpa, the postman of old souls. But Little Grandpa's legacy didn't end with his passing. Hope, now a young adult cat, seemed to step into his role, as if guided by an invisible hand. She started spending more time with the residents, offering them the same quiet companionship, the same gentle comfort that Little Grandpa had provided. She'd sit beside them on the benches, purring softly, allowing them to stroke her fur. She'd bring them small gifts, a colorful leaf, a smooth pebble, a captured butterfly, much to the amusement of the staff. She'd even start to wait outside the entrance door like the old cat used to. The residents, seeing the echo of Little Grandpa in Hope's actions, were deeply touched. They started calling her Little Grandpa, too. The name now, a title, a legacy passed down from one generation to the next. And so the cycle continued. Hope, once a lost and fragile kitten, now carried the torch of compassion and connection, offering solace and companionship to the residents of Sunset Acres. The withered corner behind the shed was replanted with flowers, a vibrant memorial to the place where a small act of kindness had blossomed into something extraordinary. The orange cat, once a symbol of solitary waiting, had become a symbol of enduring love, a legacy passed down, a torch carried on in the gentle paws of a young cat named Hope. The seasons continued their timeless dance, painting the landscape of Sunset Acres in ever-changing hues. Spring's vibrant blossoms gave way to summer's lush greenery, followed by autumn's fiery display and winter's stark beauty. And through it all, Hope patrolled the grounds, a smaller, sleeker, but equally steadfast presence as her predecessor. She'd sit on the windowsills, watching the residents with knowing amber eyes, offering a silent, furry companionship that transcended words. She'd curl up on laps, purring softly, chasing away the shadows of loneliness. She'd bring her own small offerings, not withered leaves or pebbles, but captured sunbeams on the floor, playful pounces on dust bunnies, and the gentle pressure of her head against a trembling hand. The stone beneath the old oak, now bearing two names, Little Grandpa, and beneath it Hope, remained a touchstone, a reminder that even in the face of loss, life finds a way, love endures, and the smallest of creatures can carry the heaviest of legacies, passing on the torch of compassion from one generation to the next, a quiet, purring testament to the enduring power of the human-animal bond. The spirit of Little Grandpa, the postman of old souls, lived on, not just in memory, but in the very heart of Sunset Acres, beating in time with the rhythm of life itself. And so, life at Sunset Acres flowed onward, a gentle current of days marked by shared meals, quiet conversations, and the ever-present comfort of feline companionship. Hope, now fully embracing her inherited mantle, became a living embodiment of Little Grandpa's legacy. She patrolled the hallways with a quiet dignity, her tabby stripes a familiar and reassuring sight. She possessed an uncanny ability to sense when a resident was feeling particularly down, offering a soft headbutt or a comforting purr just when it was needed most. She even developed a peculiar habit of leaving small, brightly colored feathers plucked from discarded craft supplies, no doubt on the doorsteps of those who seemed to need a little extra cheer, a whimsical echo of Little Grandpa's floral deliveries. The staff, with a knowing smile, would collect these feathered offerings, tucking them into vases or pinning them to bulletin boards, a constant reminder of the enduring spirit of compassion that permeated the walls of Sunset Acres, a legacy whispered on the breeze and carried on the soft paws of a cat named Hope, the second Little Grandpa, forever the postman of old souls.